Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Praveen and you are watching Techie Praveen. So in this video, I'm going to talk about what is basic auth and digest auth and how to hit this in rest assured. So let's get started. So this is my Postman collection where I have put some basic authentication collection, basic auth, digest auth and hawk auth. So we'll cover up one by one these type of authentication. So firstly, let's see how exactly this collection has been made. So this is HTTPS postmanecho.com. So if you go to your browser and search for this website, you will get a official website of Postman where you will get a lot of APIs along with their documentation. So in this collection, basically, it helps you a lot while practicing different APIs. So here, if you search for authentication, so you will get to see a lot of authentications APIs. So it have basic auth success, basic auth failure, digest auth, hawk auth, and auth 1.0. So if you click on basic auth, so you will get an overview of how exactly basic authentication works and what is the proper documentation of that and what is the authorization type, means what are the different parameters it requires for authorizations. So I have used this collection and made my personal collection for Postman so that you will get a very easy access for all these API without uh, without much interactions or without much documentation. You will only see the required part. Okay, so this is my basic auth URL, which is a get call. So let's go for authorization. So if you go for authorization, you will get to see a lot of basic or lot of different techniques for authorization. So currently it has inherit auth from parent, no auth, basic auth, bear token, JWT bear, digest auth, auth 1.0, 2.0, auth authentication, AWS signature, NTLM, API key, Akamai, Edge Grid, and ASAP Atlassian. Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about only the basic auth. In upcoming videos, we're going to talk about all this type of authentication one by one. So let's go for no auth. So if you go for no auth, then there will be no parameter need to be passed. Like it's a non-primitive where basically you are not passing anything. Okay. So in basic authentication, if you look at this, it requires two parameters, username and password. And if you go for the official website, in basic auth, there is only two parameters is required. One is username and password. Okay. So in basic authentication, two parameters required, username and password. So the username here is Postman and the password is password. And there will be no such important parameter is passing, only the authorization. So authorization is passing through a header. So if I send this, I'll get the response as a authenticated true, and the response code will be 200. Okay. So let's create rest assured for this. So I'm opening my IDE and creating one class that is basic auth. Okay. And let me create my request specification rest assured dot given and request specification. Sorry, I have to create my main method first. Request specification dot base URI. So my URI is this one. Okay, and my request base path. So in URI, this is my complete URI part, and next is my base path. And if something comes up after question mark, then it becomes a query parameters. Okay, so it we need to pass it through query parameters. Now I have to create one response of this. Response equals to request specification uh, dot auth dot basic auth I'm going to use. Okay, so it requires two parameters, one string two. So why two parameters? Because it's basic authentication always requires two options, username or password. So it requires two different parameters. And now using get, I'm able to get the response of that. So first thing is that one thing is primitive and another one is non-primitive. As we have discussed earlier in the previous video, that there will be two different way of authentication or basic authentication. One is primitive, another one is non-primitive. So in non-primitive, basically we are not passing the credential via our first request. We only hitting the API to get the 401 response from the server, and the second hit second request will going to send the authentication part. It becomes non-primitive, and primitive whenever we are passing the authentication in the first request itself, it's become primitive. So by default, every every basic authentication is a non-primitive. By default, every basic auth is a non-primitive. Okay. So currently this response, this line is a non-primitive. And if I want to make it primitive, what I need to do is, okay, let me pass first username and password. So my username is pass postman and my password is just a password. Okay. So this is my non-primitive. And if I want to make it primitive, this is my non-primitive. And if I want to make it primitive, then I have to type primitive here. Okay, so now it becomes primitive. So this is my non-primitive, and this is my primitive. Okay, so so now I am going to this is my basic authentication. So I'm going to get the body dot as a string and south dot I need to print the response status as well. So this is my status code. So let me run this and check I'm able to get all the proper response or not. So yes, it's authenticated true as a 200. Okay. So I'm able to get the basic auth. So you always, if you are passing your all parameters in the first request, you always use primitive to make it primitive. Otherwise, by default, every basic authentication is a non-primitive thing. Okay. So this is the basic auth. And if I want to make it digest also, okay. So let me copy my complete code for digest auth. So let's go to Postman and check what are the basic requirements for digest auth. So if I click on digest auth and choose authorization as a digest auth, so I'm able to see that this also required only username and password. Okay, and there will be some advanced configuration below that. So in basic auth there will be no only username and password requires, there will be no advanced thing, but in the digest auth there will be username and password, and there's an advanced configuration. So in both basic and digest authentication, it requires only username and password to hit that API. Okay, but then what will be the difference in basic auth and digest auth? So in basic authentication, basically is use base 64 to encode it all the credentials, but it's not that encrypted so that anyone can easily use it and easily break the security of this. But in digest auth, there will be different algorithms through which the credentials are getting encoded so that the security will be higher as compared to basic auth. Okay, we're going to see the difference in some minutes. So this is my basic auth. So if I click on this by using the same user and password, I'm able to see the authenticated true and my status code will be 200. Okay. So in my, let me remove my primitive and non-primitive, and my URL is also different. and let's put here basic auth. Okay, and here I have to use digest dot get. Then username and password is same, postman, and password is password. Okay, and let me hit it and get the response. Okay, authentication with authenticated. My response is authenticated and my response code is 200. It means I'm able to use the authentication of digest auth. So both are exactly same, only there is a difference is in basic authentication you have to put primitive or non-primitive as per your requirement, and then you have to put basic here for basic authentication, and if you want to use digest auth then you have to use digest here. Okay, yes, everything is same. Okay, now let's talk about the exact difference between basic authentication and digest authentication. So I have a ppt for that. So if you look into this, there will be some differences in basic authentication and digest authentication. So you have to learn this because in many of the interviews, the people are basically asking what is the difference between basic authentication and digest authentication. So first one is credential set. So there username and password both requires username and password for as a credentials, but it requires base 64 encoded. So basic authentication base 64 is used for encoding the credential. However, it is not that much secure. And in digest authentication, a hashed version of the credentials and other request data has been used so that it becomes more in security perspective. Security credentials are sent in the plain text. Base 64 encoded is a plain text. So, and credentials are hashed and sent in a secure manner. Encryption required? Yes. If not using HTTPS, it's insecure. And that is authentication more secure than basic, but still recommended to use HTTPS. Replay attack protection? No. And yes, in digest, yes, use nonce and timestamp to prevent reply attacks. So basically, in the authentication, you can also pass timestamp. Complexity in basic is simple to implement and use, and that is authentication. More complex to implement requires generating hashing. So whenever you are creating your API by using a digest authentication and you're putting digest authentication, you have to use hashed version so that the credentials that are moving from your request to the server becomes in a passing in a more secure way. And because of that security, it becomes little bit complex. Let's talk about the hashing algorithm. So in basic authentication is only a non-plain text. There will be no hashing algorithm. In digest authentication, typically MD5, SHA-25 to 256 or other secure hashes are using for passing the credentials. Now use case is suitable for simple use case, especially with HTTPS, and digest authentication more secure, recommended for sensitive or high security apps. So basically, if someone asks in a single line that how exactly basic authentication is different from digest authentication, you can easily tell them that the basic authentication using base 64 encoded, they are passing data in a plain text, and digest authentication they will be using a hash version of the credentials and basically using hashing algorithm for to passing the credential. Okay, and if you look into the this, so you will able to see the algorithm MD5 SA MD5 SSS SA 256 SA 256 SESS, and these type of different algorithm that we can use to make it more secure. Okay, so this is for this video. I'm going to explain you the Hawk authentication and bear token in the next video. I hope you like the video and you like my teaching style. If you like my video, then please do subscribe to my channel and share it with your friends. And if you are facing any issue, do let me know in the comment section. I will definitely try to create a separate video for you to solve your problem. Thank you. Thanks a lot.